Most of you are seeing Jane for the first time tonight. So just for the sake of, not on behalf, just for the sake of Jane, everyone can introduce themselves, then Jane can introduce herself later, and then we can all start together, yeah? So, anyone wants to start, or should I pick anyone to start off?
I will start. By the way, Rachel is missing today. Oh, I don't see her. Okay. So welcome, Jane. My name is Jackie. I'm a professional DJ based in Nairobi, Kenya. I've been DJing for 17 years and I'm a green producer. I'm learning how to produce, and I've been under Santuri, Fem Electronic, and also trying to learn on my own, as well as getting help from other producers here. So it's really nice to have a lady also showing us how to produce and sharing her experience in this class. This is very special to all of us, I think. And also connecting borders between you, David, and us. I really appreciate you guys being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Shots. Who wants to go next? Anyone. The room is open. Anyone can go next.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Jane. Nice to see you again. We're so excited for this session because, as I was saying before, mixing is it's one of those things that like really... Anyway, yeah, so very happy for this session. I'm a DJ, closet upcoming producer, hoping to make better and better music. So we really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's hear from the guys. James, on the left, address the nation.
Wagwan Brexit. No. That's just some local greeting. Anyway, my name is Blair. You can call me James. I'm a DJ, producer. I'm really excited for this session because mixing is something I'm really interested in. So I'm eager to learn your techniques and see what you have for us today.
Nice, awesome. Victor Munyasia, are you here? Awesome.
Yeah. So hi guys, my name is Munyasia. I go by the name Munyasia. I'm a DJ, producer. I've been at it for quite a while, but producing just began last year, late last year. Yeah, mixing is it's one of those things that I'm just interested in because I produce a lot of tracks, but I just suck at mixing. So I'm really excited to see how this session goes, and it's nice meeting all of you for another time. Yeah.
Awesome. Melody.
Hi, my name is Melody. I am a producer, been producing maybe the last kind of 2 years. And yes, as Emma said, mixing is showing us all premium dust. It's terrible. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot about mixing. Yeah.
One thing I know about mixing, okay, to me, mixing is one of the best things I love doing. Other than production, now mixing is where now we get the job done proper. You know, you get to play around with your ears and your eyes at the same time. Play around with the frequencies. It's fun. Mixing is so fun. It is so fun. So don't look at mixing like Kazi Mjengo, you know. It's so fun. It's so fun. Sorry, Jane and David, Kazi Mjengo is construction work. Sorry. Yeah, so Monria.
Hi everyone. I am Monria, producer, DJ. And yeah, I'm excited for this session because I'm tired of like sending tracks to people and they're like, like they say it's nice, but the mix down, it needs mixed down and whatever. And me, like on my headphones, it sounds like proper. But when like the professionals hear it, apparently they have different opinions. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I'd love to learn about mixing. Then once we get better at mixing, then we can learn more about now mastering a track and stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Is there anyone who hasn't talked? I think we have all talked.
Nabalayo.
Nabalayo.
Did I miss?
Yeah. Yes, Nabalayo. Thank you. Yes, Nabalayo. Sorry.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
So my name is Navalayo. I'm a producer, I'm a vocalist, multi-instrumentalist, orchestral violinist, music degree holder in performance, and I started producing 2 years ago. And I'm currently pioneering a genre I called Changanya. So that's what I'm doing right now. Produced my own album this year, but I didn't mix it because clearly I also am struggling with mixing. So I'm really happy to be here to learn about that.
Sweet. In the right place. In the right place, definitely. So I'll hand it over to Jane. Take it from here.
Okay.
Yourself, yeah. Then you can progress from there.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I was saying hello the first bit, and I didn't realize I was muted. But anyway, it's also good to be patient and hear and get to know a little bit about all of you first. So I'm really excited that you're excited about mixing, because that's often the first challenge. People just think, oh, boring mixing. But as Mike was saying, I love it. It's something I'm really, really passionate about. So I always enjoy the opportunity to talk about it with people that are interested. So really brief about my history or who I am or whatever. I work as a mix engineer. People will send me their tracks and I'll mix them. I also am a producer. I kind of work with a bunch of different artists across many different genres, from acoustic, string or so. I think Nabala was saying that she's a violinist and classically trained, and my background is from there originally, to doing things like techno, because I live in Berlin. And that's what happens when you live in Berlin. You end up making house music or techno, which is cool. So, and I'm here in a studio. This is the studio of the school that I teach at. So I'm also an educator, and my speciality actually at the moment, really, I really teach mixing a lot. So yes, hopefully I can share with you some insights to help you kind of get further with your mastery and your kind of confidence, I think, with what to do when you mix. And I think that if I kind of just kick in already into the webinar, like I think that is often one of the problems, is that people don't know. Like, it's like often I'd say what mixing is, or the boundaries, and people are like, oh yeah, I mean, I do that. So, and I think that it's about, for me, the process of creating a song from beginning to end, or a track, or whatever you want to call it. There's different decisions that we make throughout the stage, and these creative decisions that we make add up to the end result. And I think that for me, at least, understanding where the priority lies for me, what I should be thinking about at different stages of the project, helps me to make a better choice in that moment. For example, I'm not thinking about mixing when I'm producing, I'm thinking about the producing stuff. So like sound design, and does it sound good, and like the character of the sound, and the mood or the emotion or the energy or the texture. When I'm mixing, I'm thinking, is this optimized? Is it coming through in the way that it should? Is it balanced with the other instruments? So it's kind of like the first thing for me is about how am I approaching the task that I'm taking. So that's, I think I want to talk a little bit about that today. So my session today is like in part a kind of lecture with some notes and some kind of discussion. And I want to throw out questions to you. I want this to be interactive in the sense that Obviously I can't do a live mix in 2 hours, because for me a mix will take 5 to 8 to 12 hours. You know, it's like a longer process for me. But I want to break down the stages and the steps, talk about my approach, my mental approach, and also get into some of the specifics of like how I set up my DAW, and also talk about some of the key audio processing actions that we do, which is equalization and compression, and really talk about that and get a bit of a sense for what you know, and like try and, you know, uncover some of the mysteries I think around that. If we have time, we'll also talk about like spatial processing and the idea about creating space and depth and dimension and all these kinds of things within the mix. So that's the vibe. I would be really interested actually to first up if you would throw out some questions. Maybe we can use the Q&A function. Is that open? Does that work? So put questions, and I would just say at anytime you have a question, put it in there, and every now and then I'll come back in and check where we're at, so that, because if you have questions as I'm going, you might forget them, and if I keep on going back and forward, it might be a bit too chippy choppy. So let's use that as a way for you to just ask questions as they arise, and I'll check in every few minutes or something. So can we just check that Q&A that it works? Just do a you know, like a test question or something.
Who's going to be first? I can't pose a question apparently as the host.
Yeah, either can I think. Maybe any of the people that are in as panelists cannot do that. Okay, so maybe that's not going to work then. Can we use the Q&A? Yeah, the chat, sorry. Yeah. So let's just use the chat. That's cool. So easy, right? We don't need to test the chat. So throw the questions in the chat, and then I'll come check those out.
Jane, actually,
Okay.
there's a question in the Q&A, actually. Someone who's posted a question.
Oh, cool. Okay. So I can't see that. I can't actually see that. Where is it?
The Q&A button next to
the Q&A. Okay, so I think that we should just use the chat. Can we do that, or is it? Yeah, so one or the other, because it will be a bit confusing. But hey, Kevin, wherever Kevin is, when did I first start mixing? I can answer that question to start off with. Let me think about this. I started mixing about 10, 12 years ago, and I started mixing because, and again, it's exactly the same thing that everyone has said here so far. I started mixing because I was frustrated that I felt like I was in my production phase. I felt like I was kind of doing it. And then people were saying it wasn't finished or send it to someone else. And then often for me, I'd send it to someone else and they kind of change it in a way that I didn't like. So then I started to realize, hang on a sec, just take a minute and maybe learn this for myself. Or the other thing that I want to say is an important aspect, maybe, because I also think that getting other people's ears on your project is really good. So sometimes I don't mix my work, I get someone else to do it. But because I know mixing, I kind of know how to communicate with them what I want. And I think that's also super valid, like to know and understand what you want so that you can work with other professionals to get the best result. So I think the tools are good, whether or not you want to mix your own music. So I started mixing about 10 years ago, yeah. Okay, so let's get started. I'll share my screen and we'll see where we're at. I'll just share my desktop. So can you all see that? So I'm going to do this for we'll probably do this for like half an hour, and then we'll shift over into the DAW. So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, what is mixing, to kind of clear that up and make it, articulate that, because I think, again, a lot of people kind of know what they're doing. They're kind of doing it without maybe being clear about it. So throw into the chat, and again, you can have these conversations with each other whilst I'm doing the talk, because it might get a bit boring if I'm just talking at you. So anytime I ask a question, I'd really encourage you to put the answer in the chat and have this side conversation with each other whilst I'm also talking, so you can, really see what you think about it. So the first question that I want you to answer is, what is mixing to you? What is it? What do you do? What is the goal? What is it? Okay, so whilst you're going to be putting your answers in, I'm going to talk about what I think mixing is. So for me, mixing is, now these are some key words. So finishing, I think Mike said that before, finishing up, tightening things up, optimizing sounds, balancing the elements, and as I said here, it's like making it sound good. So that's cool. All right. What does that mean? And how do I make that into some, how do I kind of action that? So for me, when I'm trying to think about what mixing is, I like to think about the whole life of a song project. And as I said, I've already kind of introduced this. When I'm thinking about any of this stuff, it's about the decision. When does the decision of this part of the process need to be made? So for example, when I am doing songwriting, the things I need to be thinking about will be the lyrics and the melody and the instruments, maybe the groove and the tempo, like what speed do I want it to be at? But I have to have that stuff finished before I go into my recording session, because once I've recorded it, it's done, right? So the thing is that when is the last time I have to make that decision? So when I'm recording, the things that are important is that I get the performance right, and that I'm making sure that the signal flow and like getting all of the technical stuff correctly, and that importantly, I capture the magic of the song, the energy. So that's what recording is about for me. When I go to production, I'm thinking about what is the sound, the essence, the character of the track, the emotion, the texture, the mood, all of those kinds of things. What is the overall arrangement and flow and movement of the song? It's the last time I can think about that before I bounce the stems getting ready to mix. So when I get into my mix, then what am I doing there? This is my final chance where I've got all of the tracks independently, where I can, change them. So optimize them and adjust them and tweak them. It's really important, I think, to remember the difference between production and mixing, which I'm going to get to that in a second. Well, now, because I think this is one of those things is when people produce, and they often produce and mix at the same time. And then in one stage, it's like, well, I produce and mix at the same time, so I don't need to mix. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But understanding for me, what the goals of production and the goals of mixing are different. So I want to demonstrate this by thinking about one specific audio processing technique, which is a chorus. Okay, so a chorus effect or an ensemble effect. When I'm using it, when I'm doing production, I want to hear the sound of the chorus. I want it to be wobbly. I want that vibey kind of watery sound. I'm using that for that specific purpose. When I'm using chorus in mixing, I actually wouldn't want the listener to hear that as a watery, as a texture, as a sound. I'm using the chorus really subtly to maybe push back one instrument in relation to another so that it gives the other instrument space. So I'm using the time dimension of chorus to move things around so that I can give them some, they work together as a whole. So it's a little bit Zach playfulness. So you as a producer, if I change the sound of your stuff, you're going to throw the mix back at me and go, you've changed it, do it again. So my job as a mixer is to maximize the inherent quality of all the stuff that's already there and not change it. And I think that can be difficult sometimes to identify. All right. So let's just check in on the chat for a sec. Let's see what people were saying about their, so is it Nabalayo? Am I saying your name right? Nabalayo? Yep. Let me know if it's wrong. So you're saying basically polishing the track. Okay. So, and also, okay, making it a creative process for sure. That's the first step. Someone is saying, Njunga is saying, trying to make it sound good in as many media as possible. Okay, so that is interesting. That to me is more to do with mastering. Okay, so we start to think about the transference of this track in an iPhone, in a dance floor, on a computer, speaker, whatever. That's more what mastering is thinking about, in my opinion, anyway. When I'm mixing, I'm just thinking about all of these sounds, how can they, and I was thinking recently, it's like this idea, you want the individual sound to be its best and you want it to also uplift the sounds around it. So it's like you're thinking of the individual and the collective all the time with all of the sounds, because they all have to work together. So it's that kind of dichotomy, I guess, which is kind of cool. All right, are there any other comments? All right, okay, so keeping on going, we'll hit back into the sesh. Okay, so now for me, I'm talking about mixing. I think it's important for me to talk about the stages of a mix. So like with my production and everything, I'm really free flow and I kind of go with it. But when I get to the mix, I have a way that I do things, and most people follow a similar kind of stage, most mix engineers. So this is what we do. And I'm going to talk about this stuff today. So the first step in mixing is generally like the setup. So you do your gain staging, which I'll explain a bit, setting up the routing or the way what signals are going to go where and why, and naming, organizing, coloring, just getting everything neat and organized. And the reason for doing this, I mean, maybe I'll explain it a little bit more later. I'll just go through these. Then we have what I call discovery and framing. And that's when I'm listening to the track and I'm thinking about, what have I got here? What things are working really well? What are the key aspects of the sound? Are there any problems that I need to be aware of that I might need to fix? Things like that. And I'll also talk about some more questions. So once I get a sense of what the mix is, where I'm at, what I need to do, then I can actually do the mix, like start doing the mix. So I look at it in these phases. These are my names for it. So clean and tighten is what I say. So this is when I'm using EQ and compression and I'm thinking about the individual sounds, how they're working, how they're relating to all the other sounds around them, and really maximizing cleaning and strengthening and optimizing the sound. Then I call it make it expensive, which is adding things like reverbs and delays and making it luscious and beautiful and really thinking about the space that the sounds are living in and moving through. Now for me, over time, I have learned for myself that it's better to wait for the make it expensive part until after I've cleaned and tightened, because if I make it all expensive or make it sound luscious, that covers up lots of little issues, so you let something swim in a reverb, it sounds gorgeous, and you just forget that there's a problem with a low frequency resonance at 200 hertz or something like that, right? So this is, I go in order for a specific reason. Okay, so I've spent time EQ compression, I've made it sound expensive, but I've probably just been looping one certain part of the song. So now I'm going to start to think about the song overall, and I'm going to think about what I saw in my discovery and framing session as like, where are the issues? Are there certain things I need to pay more attention to? Most often these days, because everyone's really into bass, it's often bass. There's often bass problems, which means that there's a kick drum, maybe there's a sub, there might be a bass 808, there could be a live bass, there could be a low conga tom sounds, there could be samples, they're all wanting to have some space in this low bass region. So that needs more attention for me to look at it and really see how it's going. Other stuff, so whatever problems I might have. And once I've done that, I feel like I've started to get all the problems, it's all sounding really good. Then I think about the whole journey of the song from beginning to end. And I think about, I call it finesse the narrative. And that's how am I building up this tension of this track? And am I keeping this development that it was the intention in the production? Have I lost my way somehow by making the kick drums so clean and powerful that we've lost the development or whatever that might be? Okay, so thinking about how we build this song. And also, if you're making music that has choruses and verses, things like, is the first chorus quieter than the second chorus, right? So often people go out really loud in the first chorus and then the second chorus feels flat. So things like that, building the song and the excitement and the motion over time. And then once I've done that, that's the mix. Then I start to bounce the mixes. I like to bounce my mixes live because then it's like a performance. So I'm in it and I hear things that I might not have heard if I just bounced it offline. So that's the summary. So now let me ask you, those of you who have mixed before, do you do anything like this? Do you have a process? Do you listen to the track and try and make notes about where you think the issues might be? Let's think about a few other questions. who feels confused about what compression does as a starter? Because I think that's a really big one that people like don't really know what it does, you know, and I think, you know, mixing context is a really important part of it. Okay, so I'm interested for your feedback about this. Okay, so when we're talking about discovery, I want to throw you a few questions that I ask myself. So when I'm asking my questions, I'm listening, right? I'm listening to the track. That's where the answers lie. So these are some of my questions. I won't go through all of them, but I just wrote down things that hit my ears when I'm thinking in that critical phase when I'm listening for the mix. So as I've already said, the heroes of the mix or the problem parts. So what things are really, really great? Is there a part that you hear every time and you're like, yes, oh, awesome. When you hear that at the beginning, before you started mixing, I like to write that down. I like to remember that, because after I've been mixing for 8 hours, I might have forgotten that special moment, and I need to make sure that I haven't killed that special moment, you know? So there's things like that, like being aware of what the good stuff is. Obviously the problems stick out, right? So we note, and also noting the problems in the beginning helps you not, because when we listen to things over and over again, our brains, if we don't pay attention to it, the brain goes, oh, I guess that she likes it. Cool, we'll just ignore that. So if I don't write it down, I might forget that that's a problem. And then I finish my mix and then I send it to someone and they're like, what's going on with that bass? And it's because I forgot to pay attention to it. So these things have helped me keep on task, I guess. I'm just going to check out the chat. There's some cool stuff going on. So yeah, I mean, Emma's saying that she thinks it's harder to mix whilst producing. And I would personally agree with that, because like, I think that for me, it's a really different headspace, and I'm not as creative as a producer when I'm thinking about these kinds of mixing things. So I like to just go wild in production. And then when it's mixing time, I'm like, all right, let's just clean things up here and get everything organized. And that works best for me. So I think everyone's got their own flow. Yeah. So James is saying, when does mixing whilst producing save time when you're at the mixing stage? And that's a really good question. And I think that the answer would be yes, in my opinion. So like, and also but again, it should just be like what your natural flow is. Like if you naturally, when you hear a kick drum, hear the EQ and hear the problem and fix it, do it, you know, like, but when you're producing, if you take time away from the creative stage of producing to try and find this problem that you can't, it's not a big deal, and you lose the flow to try and mix as you produce, then I think it's not helpful. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm being clear there, but it's like, if it's natural and quick and reactive and you hear it, yeah, do it when you hear it, but don't try and force the two things together if it's not natural. Yeah, cool, okay. So Victor's saying, I work with individual groups mostly, and then work with EQ, and then bounce a pre-master with a comfortable headroom. So this is the way that you approach your mix. Is that right, Victor? Yeah? Yeah,
that's how I approach it.
Cool, yeah, okay, cool. So you have your individual stems, and then you think about the groups and you kind of work to the groups, submixes, I guess, subgroups, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
like
drums,
drums, bass, keys, synth, etc.
Yeah.
Cool, okay, yeah. Awesome. And we're going to talk also a little bit about the routing and the way that you can kind of set up your mix. There's lots of ways to it. I mean, I can get in depth about routing as a creative workflow. I'll try to keep all of this stuff not too intense tonight necessarily if you're interested, but you know, a lot of really big mix engineers, their routing structure is their, you know, signature, you know. So like Andrew Sheps is an American mix engineer that does this parallel compression technique, or I can't think of other people off the top of my head, but yeah, so there's specific, you know, routing approach as part of the signature. So Emma's saying, compression is confusing. Yes. Okay, cool. Totally. So what bouncing the mix. Yep. Sorry to be clear about that, is when you record the mix down to a stereo stem, which is a pre-master, just to be, clear that up. Cool. Okay, so going back into it. So some of these questions, you know, thinking about, hang on, I've lost my, sick. So, okay, as I said, so thinking about the sounds, are they competing or clashing? Are the sounds working together? Also, what's the most important instrument? So the important instruments for, you know, groove-based music is going to be the percussion, and then maybe the relationship between the percussion and the bass. With pop music, it's the vocals. With, you know, piano ballads, it's the piano and the vocal. So there's different, there'll be, you know, different, with guitar, with rock music, it's the guitar generally. Okay, so there's different things that we need to think about to give the focal point. Also thinking about the dynamic, like, is there movement in the song, and is it too much or too little? Or how does the dynamic, is it consistent throughout? You know, because sometimes you'll have a good dynamic and then you introduce a sample that's already been really, really processed and it's kind of super compressed. And so the idea that the whole mix should have a consistency dynamically. Again, as I've already said, what's the essence of the song? Is it groove based? Is it about emotion, etc.? Okay, so these, I won't keep on going, but these are the questions and more. So the idea of sharing these with you was, you know, to give you like a sense of the mindset that I go into when I'm mixing, and to really clarify, hopefully, I mean, again, for your feedback, like, it's really different from when you're producing, right? It's a different, you're looking for different things. There's different outcomes. Okay. So getting started on the mix. Now, as I said, getting started, setting up the door, organizing, naming, coloring and grouping, routing and gain staging. So I just actually am going to have to stop the share for a sec because I don't think I shared my audio. So I'll go back in. Oh, no, I did. Okay, so I'm using today, now this is actually a brand new file. I just got out of work and loaded it up. So I haven't even actually done anything to set this up. So I'm going to go through it with you. Now, this is not the most important part of the mix, but it is important, and I do it the same every time because this workflow, now this is what I wanted to say importantly, is that having a workflow and doing these kind of housekeeping-y things like naming and like coloring help me there, because some people go, who cares about that? And essentially I agree, it's not the most important part of the mix. But the reason that I do it, and the reason I think it's important, is that when I'm in the mix and I'm hearing something and I'm, you know, I want to be able to respond to the sound really quickly. I don't want to get lost searching for something and not knowing where things are, because as soon as I spend more than about 10 seconds, I've lost the connection with that with the sound. Your brain changes it and you can't, so I've got to go back in again. So for me, this is really important. So I will just do quickly what I would normally do in a mix. So I'm going to color all these the same. Now I've got a certain color scheme that I've used for many years. So it's completely random, but I just do it because I do it. So the drums I'm going to leave there. Bass is coming. So, and again, the organization, the order is really specific, as well as the colors. Don't know why my oh, hang on. One sec. Now, I also must confess, I don't actually use Ableton to mix, but I wanted to kind of use the program that everyone's using today. And, you know, again, to demonstrate the point, it doesn't matter where you mix, it's all kind of the same. But I may make a few silly kind of mistakes along the way. So forgive me for that. Okay, so let me do this quick. And then another pink, sax is green. Grand, okay, so I've got my, now that's also a keyboard, so keyboards are pink, pinky colors. Okay, so normally, now this is a track that doesn't have a lot of, well, a song that doesn't have a lot of individual tracks. Like normally I'm working with tracks that are from 50 to 150 individual channels. So this coloring and naming scheme becomes really, really important. So the more individual channels that you have, the more important it becomes. So once I've got my naming and organization, then I'm going to think about some routing decisions. So here, the first question for me would be, do I want these drums to be coming into a drum subgroup? Why would I want those drums to be in a subgroup is the next question. One is organizational. Is it neater? Two, and probably more importantly, is do I want to do any processing to the group as a whole so that they move together, or to, for kind of control? So that would be compression. And in this case, the kind of song that it is, I'm going to say yes, I will want to do that. So I'm just going to group those tracks, and I'm going to call that. Now I'm really specific with again, naming and organizing stuff as I do it. It just saves time. Okay, so I've got my drums, and again, if I go into here, these are all these are summing into the group. If I just want it for organizational purposes, I can select all of these and I can make them go out to the master, right? So you can choose, but I want them to go to the drums because eventually I want to put a compressor on that group so I can think about how the drums are going to move together. Okay, so other than that, I'm pretty good to go basically with this. So the next step is gain stage. What is gain? Does anyone gain stage? Do they know what it is? What do you do with gain staging?
Is it the process of reducing the inputs to a compressor, a rack, so that the compressors can work optimally? So you do that sometimes by reducing the gain.
So the gain going, so yeah, I mean, you can absolutely. So that would be clip gain adjustment into a compressor. So you're thinking about the level that you're getting into the compressor before compressors. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Okay, I'm just looking. So, oh, sure. Yep. Yes, Linda. Yeah, I'll go back to that. So James is saying, so what is gain staging? It's reducing the gain of the samples, yeah, or the tracks. Okay, so let me answer Linda's question there. So I selected the tracks. If I Command Z that, I selected them by holding down Shift and clicking on one end on the other end. And then I did Command G. And then I hit, or Control G if you're on a PC. Then Command R to rename, and then drums, yeah. Okay, so reducing the gain. So now how do you reduce the gain? There's in Ableton, you can reduce the gain by clicking on the detail view, and you can, over here where it has the gain, you can turn this up and down, right? So that's one way. The old school way, and the way that I tend to do it, because I'm old school, is to use the utility plugin or the gain plugin. Is it the gain? Is it called gain? EFG. No, it'd be the utility. So the utility plugin, and I put it on all of the individual ones and I adjust the gain this way. It doesn't matter. Either way, whatever works for you. I like to do this because when I'm in the mix, I don't like to go back into this view and mess with this. It's literally a workflow thing. So for me, I use the utility plugin. Hang on, where's it gone? The utility plugin, because I might have, let's say I've got a compressor, and then I realized, oh, I was a bit too heavy-handed with that gain adjustment. So then I can just do that super quick. So that's the other. And also the utility plugin has lots of other different cool features, which I can also talk about in a minute. Okay, so I would put the utility plugin on every single channel, which I'm going to do now. And see where we're at. Cool, and actually, this. All right. Did I get on everything? Oh no, not that one. Okay, so now, cool, we've got our basic setup and everything. Let's start to listen to some sound. And actually, I almost wish that I hadn't done screen sharing because I kind of want it to play and us to look at the meters. But let's play the track and see where we're at. So this is one of the tracks that is on the the Google Drive that you all have access to. Okay, so I just had to listen to the track and I'm doing discovery, right? So I'm into my discovery and framing stage, and this is the first time I'm listening to the track. And even if it's your track and I would always recommend when you're mixing, give some space between when you finish your production and you start your mix, if you can. Like sometimes deadlines hit you, but if you can leave it off and do something else, your brain kind of forgets all of the nitty gritty detail that you're in production, and you can hear the mix fresh, and you can like react to it in a more intuitive way that will get you better results. Because I think one of the things, particularly when we mix our own music, is that we're super critical. Generally, you know, we're like, this is bad, that's crap, I need to fix that. So I think often for me it helps to give space, and then I'm just back and I'm like, oh yeah, and I remember the good feeling, and in this moment is when I'm like, this song is about groove. Okay, I've got to watch out, the live drums are taking over, for example, was the first thing I heard there. Making the sweeps, I want to use the space to get the sweeps like falling into space and coming back, you know, so starting to get a sense of dimension. At the moment it's pretty flat. What other things did I hear? The bass, I didn't even notice the bass, so I want to go closer and be like, is it just a kick drum, or is there an actual bass line? And if there is a bass line, I'm going to need to bring that out. So these are again, this discovery phase, I'd be making notes on this as I'm listening and enjoying it, and just kind of starting to let the song wash over me. Okay, I just want to check in with the chat for a sec. Okay, so yeah, so someone's saying why the utility and not the faders. That's a really, really good question. Now, the reason why not the faders, now this is where it is kind of a little bit difficult with Ableton, because Ableton's kind of built differently from these kind of analog mixing desks that I use here, or Logic or Pro Tools. It has a slightly different approach, in the sense that the fader, if you can see here, is set to maximum, to 0. Now that is actually the loudest point, the digital clipping point, and the danger zone point. So because you can't go any higher, right? So quite often when people start mixing, and what I used to do, or what I recommend for people that are mixing in Ableton, is to set your faders, select everything, select your faders. Now, this, we set them to -18. Now I'm not going to go into this, but you can, the relationship between metering, like this is a dBFS scale, and what's called unity point, which relates to the 0 point on an analog mixing desk, like behind me, is 0 equals -18. Okay, so most faders on a mixing console, which these doors are like recreating, you would set the faders lower. And so what does that do is it gives you more headroom, and it lets you, the nature of when we mix is to turn things louder. So again, you do this or not, but these are some of the ways that people approach their mix, that they kind of bring things down. So yeah, so if I'm going to be doing that for this mix, the way it's been kind of calibrated is that, you know, it's the way that, looking at the mix the way that it is, it's been calibrated so that the faders are at 0. So I'm not going to change that now. Okay, I'm going to leave all of these where they are set. Now, how do I know that? Is because when I put this is a VU meter here, and you can get them for free. This is a Waves one, and I think it costs about €10. I don't know what that equates in Kenya, but there's also free ones that you can get very easily. So free VU meter, and you'll get some really good VU meters. Now I like this because it's really interactive. If I play this again, the way that the needle hits the 0 point, because this has already been well kind of pre-mixed actually. This is very, obviously the person who's doing it is very talented and knows what they're doing. So a lot of the effort is already taken out. So the needle's hitting the 0 point. I'll demonstrate that again. Okay, so you can see there, though, actually, as you listen to it, there were moments where at the bass and the drum and the live drum sample we're hitting, it was kind of getting more towards +3. So that means that that tells me by looking at this meter that there's some competition or some clash happening in a low frequency between the kick drum, the bass, and the live sample. So that says to me, you got to go check out this problem, Jane. Pay attention to what's going on down there. So, so this is why we're using the meters. Okay. So with the faders thing, if you're using Ableton, I would recommend that you just leave them where they are. If you're using another program, the faders will be set lower, like by default. Okay, so setting the gain stage based on where the faders are in the default position, I think is probably the best advice that I could give. Ultimately, mixing is a creative process, and you might decide the reason I like the faders lower, because the tendency is to like turn things up. You go, oh, I want a bit more of that. I want a bit more of that. So that's what I use the faders for, is I'll turn things up or down a little bit. But this is after I've done my gain stage, right? So that someone said, why are we using the, hang on a sec. Why are we using, if I come back to the utility, instead of just turning the fader down like this, right? That's the question. So the answer is that I want my faders to represent when the faders are in their stable position, all of the sounds should be kind of balanced. And then I use the faders for the creative, like I automate the faders and I turn them up or down slightly at different stages of the mix to bring out different character and stuff like that. If I've already, like, let's say I've got something that's really loud and I bring it down like that, you can see that the fader is, it's not, so when it's down this low, you move the fader that much and you've moved 5 dB. So that puts a massive jump in the level. So one of the problems that people say that are producers, they go like, I can't get this to sit in the mix right. It just doesn't sit right. And that's because, you know, anything I do, I move it up a bit, I move it down a bit. It's too loud if I touch it up a bit, or it's too soft if I touch it down. That to me immediately says gain stage problem. So you get everything so that it sounds good when all the faders are at the default, and then any adjustments that you make slightly up or slightly down is for creative purpose. So gain staging can be confusing. I don't know if everyone's still feeling confused there. I'm going to let you throw in your responses, and I'm going to do a bit of a gain stage as I would do it in this mix right now. Okay, so I shall return. Okay. Okay, so first of all, this kick, I want it to be mono, and it's currently stereo. So where's my utility? I didn't actually get it onto that one. So another reason for using this is so that the utility I can turn that into mono straight away. So the reason that I want mono is that if you have below a certain frequency, sounds omnidirectional, and if you have a stereo signal, it can create a phase cancellation. It just doesn't sound good, basically. So it sounds lower than, I don't know, like 100, you can say 150 or something around that. You can, or here it's set to 120, you can see over here. So that is going to mono out. If I just had hit the bass mono button, that would mono out everything below 120 hertz and let everything above it to stay stereo. So this allows your bottom end to be clean and tight and punchy and powerful. So everything below 120 mono. Okay, so for me, I just want the whole kick drum mono. So I'm just going to hit that mono button. And maybe also my bass to be mono. No, that's not going to work, right? Because it's got chorus and it's got some movement and some space in the stereo field above. So what I will do though is I'm going to do the bass mono button and let it below 100, or keep the default below 120, make that mono. Okay, now let's hear these two together. Okay, so I can hear in there that there's some conflict between the low frequencies, that when they hit certain notes, that it really blows out a lot. And so that's going to be a problem later on in the mix. So I'm noting that as well. But for now, I continue on with my gain stage and see where everything's at. Okay, so this is sticking out to me as well. So basically the gain stage is anything that is too loud or too soft, I'm going to adjust it slightly. That's it. Okay, so gain stage to make it more confusing than it is. If it sounds good, it's all balanced, leave it. Okay, so there's a problem with this one. So I'm going to turn that down a bit. So where's my losing my utility there? Bongos. Now I'm listening to it in the context of the mix always. Okay, I like that a little bit better, cool. And then the final thing is that the important thing is that the total, all of the sounds together, I want to always be checking in on my VU meter. Cool, and making sure that they're hitting that 0 point more or less. Okay, so it's not a perfect art. I don't want to spend too long on the gain stage because this is not the creative part of the mix, but this is the process that I'm going to go through. Oftentimes in a mix, I will have this, as I said, this mix has been set up really well. I'll often have things like, let me fake something, right? If I have, people will send in things like this, and then maybe this is really quiet. Okay, so then I get this kind of thing in the mix. And it's really obvious, okay, the bass is way too loud. So then I go to my utility and I just turn it down. So this is these things. Right? About this. Okay, so making that all balanced. So in summary, gain staging, making sure that there's no clipping in the master and that you're hitting the right level that you've set the master bus to be. Now I use a VU meter, so I want everything to hit 0, and that relates, if you're just using the meters of Ableton, it relates to -18. Okay, you can see here, mine has said headroom is 18. Okay, so the master has got to be at a certain level when everything's combined. I use a VU meter because it can go over that. It can go into the red and I'm like, oh, careful. But also I don't care because a little bit in the red is still loads of headroom. Whereas if you use a digital meter, if you go to 0, it's like all over, right? It sounds terrible. So this is why I use a VU meter. I like it. And it's fun. It's like visual. It's like the needle's moving. It moves in relation to the groove and I just enjoy it. So, that's why I use it. So I've got my master, and then I am thinking about, are all of the individual sounds, are they all balanced, generally relating to each other, and it all kind of makes sense. So as I said, this gain stage is pretty easy. We're done with the gain stage. Moving on to the next bit. Any questions about the gain stage before we move on? It's all good. Cool. Okay, so actually I'm coming back to a few questions. So Rachel is saying, why don't you just put the utility on the group channel? So for me, the group channel is, and again, I just want to say, like, ultimately mixing is your process. You do what you want to do. For me, there's different reasons why I use the group. So I do the gain stages on the individuals first and get the levels right, because I actually want those individual channels to go into the group kind of already balanced. And then I'm using the group to further refine it. So I'm going to use the group to send like to a compressor or to EQ it. So I wouldn't just use the group to then turn stuff down because the internal balances would be off. So that's why I do it individually first up. Okay, and then Emma's saying, when you mix, do you rely on your headphones or monitors for the complete song? Now, this is a really good question. It's a difficult one because like ultimately it's always better to mix in monitors, but once you have monitors, there's two really important things. Is the quality of your monitors. Are they coloring the sound? And two is the quality of your room. How is your room? Is it reflecting in weird ways? And is it adding different resonances that you're listening to the room in addition to the song? If that's the case, you should mix in headphones, and then you should check the mix also in monitors and in different room environments to see what it sounds like. Obviously as DJs, when you can get it into a bigger sound system, that's always like important, and you have that opportunity anyway, right? Because you're working. But generally mixing into monitors is best. So, but not always possible. Okay, so use headphones if you can't have that. Okay, so moving on. So the next part of what we're doing, I've done all the gain staging and the routing. The next thing is thinking about audio processing. So now I'm getting into the EQ and compression, the kind of organizing and tightening and making and optimizing this. So again, this mix is actually pretty good. What I have heard straight away, there's one issue that really sticks out to me. I don't know if anyone has heard it, but it's the bongo. That track with the bongo just doesn't quite sound right. And I think there's a weird resonance there. So I'm going to solo that and see what I can do to fix it. Okay, there it is. So that's like, doesn't sound like, I guess it's supposed to sound like a bongo, but it sounds like a snare drum without the snare on, I think. Maybe it's a bongo? I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to loop that bit. And this is where it gets annoying unless you're the person mixing. So I'm going to be listening to that again and again to try and figure, get the right frequency. So I need an EQ for this. So I'm going to use as often as I can. I'm just going to use Ableton plugins. So it's stuff that you can all access. Cool. Okay. So now one of the other really important things, and actually maybe I'll go back to my notes for a sec here. As I said, EQ, hang on, I keep on losing my place here. So EQ and compression are the most important aspects. And for me, okay, equalization, just a bit of a summary about it. The frequency spectrum, obviously we're thinking about hertz and we're related to pitch, and it relates to arrangement. So quite often when there are problems with clashes of different instruments or sounds, that can often be fixed in the arrangement. So oftentimes, if the better we are at arrangement, the easier our mixing is. So if it's relating to the vertical arrangement of sounds, so the sounds that are happening at the same time stacked on top of each other, and this is how we're trying to manage them over the full frequency spectrum, right? And three ways we interact with EQ: cut, boost, or balance. So we're cutting out problematic frequencies. We're boosting or enhancing stuff that we think sounds really good and we want to come through the mix more. And we're doing a bit of both when we're thinking about two instruments that are not quite working as well as they should be together. Okay. Now, the important thing, I wanted to say this first. How do you get good at EQing? The main important thing for me is practice, and that is like ear training. So there's loads of ear training apps out there, and maybe I'll pick this up at the end. I can give you some links to some good ear training apps. So learning to hear the frequency, hear a sound, know what number or what frequency that matches. So coming back to where we're at now, so it's so that kind of sound, and is it there or is it the first overtone? So that to me says it's kind of a bit of a honky sound, which says to me around the kind of 500 to 800 hertz region is where I'm going to start. So, and also obviously we've got a graphic EQ that can help us out as well. But I always think it's better learn and get your ears working for you. It's all about listening more than looking, okay? So ears is everything, I think. So I can now look and see that that seems to be the problem tone, which, yeah, that's about, let's see exactly where it was, 500 and, yeah, 540. Okay, so, and now I'm gonna boost it just to show you. Oh, hang on, tighten the cue, and let's hear it. Or is it this? No. Yeah, it's this bit here. Right, okay, so I've identified the frequency, and now I'm gonna get rid of it. Now I'm gonna tighten that because I just want the ring part to come out. So I'm gonna tighten it even further. Hang on a sec. And I'm gonna take it, this is called surgical EQ. I wanna cut it. Okay, now let's hear that in the context of the mix and see if it's made any difference. Yeah, okay, so I can hear, again, subtle kind of change, but I can hear it and I like it. Now, the other thing that I've heard with this, which is I'm kind of getting a bit away from myself, but I do want to fix things so they hear it. I'm thinking a gate might be nice on this sound a little bit. Let's hear this. Oh, actually, no, sorry, I can't because we were also using the drums behind it. So let's ignore that. Okay, so I've done my EQ, great. Now let's hear that. I want to keep on listening through and seeing if there's any other things that I'm not liking. Okay, so the kind of the keyboards are not really cutting through very much there for me. So now I want to think about what, rather than problems, because this track has been very well produced, it doesn't have many problems. So what I'm thinking about is, can I hear everything? Is everything like sounding as like nice as it can, and is it coming through? So I don't really know what's going on with the DX7, so I want to check it out because it doesn't have a character to me at the moment, you know. Okay, no, it does. So that's cool. So basically, though, the part of it that I wasn't catching was I want to bring out the percussiveness. So maybe I can bring that out with a bit of spatialization, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. The next thing that I've heard with this is that the bass and the kick need a little bit of attention. So the kick drum's here. I'm just going to bring that back to number 1 spot and the snare to number 2, and listen to the kick by itself. So this has, it sounds like it might have been gated already. So there was some, maybe it was part of a live drum set. I might try to enhance that a bit further. It's all, again, it's also, it has already been kind of like mixed to a certain extent, but let's check it out. So let's say I want to compress this a little bit, and I want to make it kind of beef it up a bit. So I'm going to use the, I want to use actually the VCA compressor. No, I'll use this one. Okay, so talking about compression, the key aspects of a compressor. Okay, so what does a compressor do is that it reduces the dynamic range of a sound over time, right? So if you have a sample, like, is this a sample? Let's investigate. Are they all exactly the same? If they're all exactly the same, then you go, yeah, so that's a sample. Now, if that's a sample, you don't need compression in the sense of, I need to control this kick drum over time because it's just one sample. So I would use that if it was a live drummer, right? And they've kicked, their foot hits differently, and then so the kick drum has different amplitudes. So for this, I would be using compression in a different way, which would be to kind of slightly change or shape the sound. So change the transient and think about the way that kick drum is hitting. So let's kind of experiment with this a little bit. I want to reduce the threshold to the point that I'm getting gain reduction. So the thing to understand is what's a little bit of gain reduction, what's a medium amount, and what's a lot, because often people don't really know that, right? So gentle compression is 1 to 2 dB. Average compression is like 3 to 6, I guess, or 3 to 5 or something. And then more than 5 or 6 dB is considered quite a lot of compression. So that's another thing. I often see people like slamming the compressor, and again, reducing what happens when you over compress stuff is that you reduce the dynamic range. And what does that mean ultimately is that your mix doesn't move. And for, you know, all of you doing dance music, that's obviously fundamental. So the balance between this impact of like loudness and impact with the music, plus not forgetting that you still want to keep movement in the mix, is a really important part of that. It's a delicate balance, I think. So let's try and experiment with killing this kick drum so it doesn't sound good and bringing it back so it still has some life. Okay, so I want to experiment. So I'm going to so the different views that we can use, and we can kind of check out what's going on. Now, again, I prefer other compressors that give a little bit more detail. I want to see exactly how much gain reduction, not just a visual. So this annoys me slightly, I've got to say. But let's play with it anyway. Now, I want to increase the ratio. The ratio relates to how much you're going to reduce anything that goes over the threshold, how much it's getting pushed down, right? So I want to go 4 to 1 is a pretty standard ratio. 2 to 1 is a ratio that is often used on subgroups and on the master bus. So 4 to 1 is often used on individual tracks like a kick drum or a vocal. Okay, cool. Okay, now let's listen to the difference between before and after and think about what's changed. So before. Now, the first thing is that it's a lot louder, and this is the first danger zone, because a lot of plugins make stuff louder, and I don't know why they do it, but I kind of do. It's because we feel like excited that we've done something good. But as a mix engineer, we don't need to be fooled. We need to be right. So I like to take that off, the makeup gain, and make my own decision for how much I need to make it up based on how much I've reduced the gain, right? So when I turn this on or off, there shouldn't be a difference in loudness. And then I can listen to what the compressor is doing and how it's changing the sound. So if you listen in, it's bringing out, it's more of the transient is coming through. So that makes the kick drum seem more aggressive. And also the low end is slightly being tightened up. That's how I perceive it anyway. So I like that actually, because it means it feels a little bit more like I'm getting a bit more impact into the sound. Let's see if we can hear any difference when I put it into the context of the mix. Okay, and what I noticed all of a sudden is that I wasn't really hearing enough of this in the mix to start off with. Okay, so that's because I didn't gain stage it properly. So I'm going to turn this up, and then we have to think about the gain on my compressor again. Okay, so for me, I can hear that when I'm turning that on and off, once I've gain staged it, that the kick drum is coming through with more kind of intensity. And the important thing to check whilst I'm doing this is my VU meter over here. What's happening is that, like, I want it to be transparent. I don't want it to be much louder, because I'm trying to make the kick drum cut through my mix without dominating the energy of the total mix. So let's see how this works. So you can see here that when I put this back on, there's a few little troubles with my gain stage I want to pay attention to. Now that I've got the kick up, I need to think about the relationship between the kick and the bass. So let's check these two out. So the kick drum has got a frequent, like, stuff going on in the low, like in the sub range. So let's go to this kick again and let's put an EQ on it. Now I'm going to do the EQ process which is balancing, where I'm thinking about both of these both the kick and the bass at the same time to think about how they can work better together. So let's check out, this is the kick frequency. So the kick drum has got a lot of energy out here, which is around 60 hertz or something, which is normal for a kick drum. All of this stuff around here is like the low rumble. And if you're in a club, you hear all that stuff, and maybe it's nice, maybe it's not, depending on the genre. For this genre, I'm going to say not. So I would probably decide to take that out. And then it has quite a lot of information in this kind of, a lot of information in this area, which is generally what's called like the knock, you know, particularly in like hip hop and trap and stuff, that gets pushed out a lot. So let me give you a demonstration so you can hear it. It's like you're knocking on a door if you really bring it out. So that knock area is often an area where people want to let the kick drum kind of come through. An area where the kick drum often sounds boxy, and maybe I'll take off the bass and just have the kick by itself. Often an area where people say the kick can sound kind of boxy or loose or flappy is in this kind of range about 300 and 400. So let me play that. That kind of makes it sound empty, right? It doesn't have any guts to it. So the other area that I should say is that the sub range, which we bring this up, right? That's that sub when you're in a club or whatever, you've got that really nice sub range. So when I'm listening to this kick drum, I can hear this just from listening, but as you start doing this stuff, you should experiment. Okay, so that's more that stompy area. What part of this sound is the great part of this sound that you want to cut through the mix and cannot be taken away, right? So for me, it's this low bit here. This is important. And it's also something up here that gives it that live feel. Okay, so I'm going to say, with my kick drum, I'm going to sacrifice some stuff around here. I might just make that a bit tighter. Right, I'm going to lose some frequency there. I'm also going to cut off some of the low stuff here. A little boost, right? And let's turn that off and hear the difference. Okay, so I've cleared some space without changing the character too much. And then I'm going to go to my bass and I'm going to remember this number, which is, what is it, 280. And then remember this, which is 40. And let's see what I can do with my bass. So in the bass range, get my EQ. Okay, so here's my bass. Now, where's the bass is kind of a bit higher at 60 hertz. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm going to sacrifice 40 hertz where the kick drum is. I'm going to reduce that a bit. So that gives some space for the kick drum to come through. So I'm going to make it a bit tighter. Find it. In fact, I'm going to maybe consider even getting rid of everything below 60 hertz. Let's see what that does. Do I care? No. That's cool, actually. A little bit cleaner though, which is great. So then the next thing is that I boosted around like, what was it? God, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, I'll double check. Where's my kick? I boosted. Oh no, I didn't actually boost it. I said that I wanted this area around like 500, 600 to kind of cut through. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the bass. And I'm going to let some of this take away some of that and see what happens. So I've just got to move my screen a bit there. Okay, so I'm going to go 600, bring that down, tighten up the cue a bit. I don't care about that stuff. And in actual fact, I think I want to go a little bit lower. Now, what am I doing here is I'm trying to listen to, is the kick coming through, those upper frequencies of the kick kind of coming through without changing or losing the energy or the life of the bass. And I think I'm kind of getting there. So now the answer, the truth will tell me in my metering when I check it out and see what's going on. Okay, so it's not blowing out anywhere near as much as it was. So these are the little things. Now, again, so this can kind of get like particular with the low end, it's kind of detailed, but this idea about thinking about the sound, thinking about its what job it has to do, and what you can do without in terms of some of the EQ, in order to let the other sounds that also have a job kind of come through as well. That's kind of the balancing EQ process. That is, an important part, particularly in the low end with stuff that has lots of bass. Okay, so I've done some EQ, I've done some compression. Let's think about, in terms of like space and things like that, is kind of the next step as we move on. Or maybe it's a time to ask some questions. I've been talking for a lot, so maybe you got some questions on compression or anything like that. There's a few questions in there, let me check in. We don't need to be fooled, we need to be right. Yes. Okay, so James is asking, after EQing, should you adjust the gain? Again, that's a really good question. Like, I think for me, compression is very important to adjust the gain because we're working in the amplitude like domain. It's all about loudness. And we can be really easily fooled that we're doing something good with compression if we don't match the loudness. That's one of the important things I think about matching loudness with compression. With EQ, often when I'm boosting part of the frequency, when I'm EQing, I'm doing it because I want that specific part of the sound to come through the mix. So if I readjusted it, then I would remove that bit to be able to be pushing through the mix. So no, I don't actually tend to readjust the gain after I've EQ'd. Unless I've done something, a big cut, like let's say I do a massive cut, like something like this. I really change the sound or do something dramatic, then I would probably need to readjust it. But for something when the actual job that I'm doing is like, I want this part, like let this bit come through, then no, I leave it as it is. Okay, any other questions or comments? Cool, all right. So the next thing is to think about, so once I've done that and I feel like everything's like moving really well together, what is gating? Okay, cool, let's do a bit of gating. That's a good question. So let's see if I've got anything here that I think could do with a bit of gating. Let's listen. I'm just going to gate the bongo just for fun. It is also in the context this has got a whole drum kit. It's a live drum kit. So I'm going to lose everything else, and I just want the bongo to come through. Right, just a bum bum. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go for where's the gate gone? Here, and so I don't want anything else except the gate, except the bongo. So I need to bring the threshold. Okay, so there. So let's just see where there's a bit of the bongo. You're on wrong thing. There we go. Okay, so let's just loop this. Okay, now the problem with this, as you can hear, is that snare is really loud, and that snare wants to come through. It's actually louder than the bongo, so that the bongo mic is picking up the snare louder than the bongo. So that's a bit of a problem. What we could get super fancy, and we could start doing things like dynamic EQ to kind of cut out the high frequency, things like that. I also could put a sidechain on the gate and start to gate out a certain frequency. I can experiment with that. Let's see. Or what I could do even more fancy is to send the bongo signal back on itself in a side chain so the gate only opens when the bongo plays. Should I try doing that? Now, let me think about this. I would send the bongo, maybe I'm just going to do it simply by duplicating the bongo track, making this not go anywhere. So I'm just going to go sends only, so it's not doing anything. I'm going to call this bongo sidechain. This might not work, y'all. I'm just going to, this is a total experiment. Oops. Okay, so bongo sidechain. Now I'm going to go sidechain on my bongo channel. Take that off so I don't get confused. Bongo channel, sidechain, audio from bongo sidechain. And let's see what happens. There we go. Okay, starting to get there. The problem is that the bongo sidechain channel has also got the snare in it. So we're still kind of getting that. But you can see that in this way, I'm starting to only let the gate open up when it receives this loud signal of the bongo. I could also do another thing now with the bongo channel, and I could get rid of all that high frequency where the snare is on. Anyway, maybe I've gone down a weird path there, but that's what gating is, okay? So we're deciding parts of the signal to let through. So we open up a gate, and then when the signal's got through that we want, we close it up again. As in this demonstration, the bongo is not quite giving us what I need or what I want here. I can experiment. Let me see if I can make it better. Okay, look, I'm going to leave it off. This is when minutes go into hours, right? So we'll leave that there. But you get the idea of starting to think about how I might be able to work that out. Okay, so where were we? I'll just check in on the questions. Okay, so we're all good. All right, so now I've got my, let's say, I've got all the elements. They're all kind of, tightened and optimized. And now I want to start to think about like making the track, thinking about the movement, the energy. And in this, I'm starting to think about how do the sounds like move in space and what is that space that I want. So obviously we can have delays and reverbs. So let's think about what might work with this track. Okay, immediately I've this bongo that I've been paying attention to. I don't know if you can hear it really loudly now because that's all I can hear. I'm really in that bongo zone. So I'm thinking, cool, what do I want? Where do I want the vibe of that bop-up? Do I want it to have some space? So I think I want it to be in a little bit of a larger space. So I'm going to send it to a reverb. Okay, so my number one send, I'm going to now set up some sends. So I'm going to call this drum plate. I'll do another one, which I can create a new return by doing create insert return track, which is also the shortcut there. And I'm going to do a large space, and then I'll do another one, which is like a tap delay. Hang on, I've already got one. Let's see. Okay, so my reverb, I'm just going to use Ableton stuff at the moment. I like to set the settings to high when I'm mixing to make sure that I've got the highest fidelity. This will take up more CPU, so you might need to see where you're at with that. Now, this is a thing, and I think a lot of people that work as producers tend to put reverbs and delays directly on the channels. So people might be going, why are you not putting this reverb on the bongo channel? So when I'm going to be mixing, I want to send a bunch of my tracks to the same space because I want it to kind of, all the sounds to kind of work together in a certain space. So that's why I'm using the sends. The second reason I use the sends is because CPU, it just takes up a lot of CPU. And then in the end of the day, my mixes grind to a halt and it's really not enjoyable. So they're the two reasons for it. the third reason relates to dimension. So if you think about how sound, now let me go large here for a sec. If you're thinking about how we experience sound in space, right? We're always in the reverberant field of sound. It's never in an echoic chamber. So there's always like the direct sound of like this, and then there's the sound of the sound bouncing around the room. So when we're mixing, we want to play with this idea of depth. And remember, mixing is a really false experience. We're trying to recreate a sense of space, which might be a fantastical space, or it could be a real space. Like quite often with pop music, people are in a kind of unreal space that would not be like reality. When you're doing jazz, you want that space to feel as though it's authentic, as though people could be in the room listening to the music, right? So this is what I want to think about when I'm thinking about spatialization. So I've got my direct sound here, and then I've got my reverb. My space is my second channel. So I want these to be two different channels. And then I'm thinking about maybe the bongo's closer away, closer than the, I don't know, the go-go or something might be further back. So the way that I relate these two signals to each other, how I send the bongo to the send and how I balance them gives me this sense of dimension and how I can really move the sounds around in an interesting way. So let's try a little bit of that now. I'll go back to share my screen. Okay. Cool, so I'm still designing my sound here. So I'm gonna send my bongo, just gonna solo that for a sec just to kind of think about the world that I wanna create. Ooh. Oh, I know what I did there. Okay, so that's my fake bongo channel. I'm gonna get rid of this gate because that didn't really work, did it? Okay, so let's try again. Oh, okay. Okay, so now I'm sending all of that sound there. So this could be a good moment for a gate, actually. Maybe I'm going to put, no, I'm going to leave it off. Okay, anyway, so here with my sound. So really starting to hear that sound, the bongo just in the background. And now for me, I want to like make it a little bit smaller and just kind of shape this a little bit. So I'm just going to work with this for a second. Okay, so I tried to think of a room. Now I didn't want it to be, it felt a little bit too bright. It felt too kind of sparkly, and I want it to be more round and for kind of more wooden. I wanted to bring out the warmth and the lower frequencies of that. So it didn't sound too kind of like, yeah, too metallic, I guess. So cool, I shaped my sound. And then the next thing is thinking about like the other sounds that might also want to share that space. So. Cool, and I've started to kind of build my drum space. So I'm gonna call that drum space. Now let's think about maybe some nicer ambiences for those keys. Oh, hang on. I think I just saw a question. So should the sends be as simple as possible, or can they be complex and random? I think like, again, this is where things can kind of get creative. Now for me, when I'm mixing, again, like you might, I'm fairly kind of have organizational. I like to kind of know why I'm doing things. This is my flow, and it does. Mix engineers tend to kind of be, I don't know, kind of fairly kind of clear about these kind of things. But if it's your flow to kind of have more sends, like, go for it. The thing that I would say about that, be careful that, like, why do you need them, and is that production? So to me, that would be more of a production thing, is that you're creating different sounds and textures and worlds. If this is a mixing decision, you might be creating more spaces than it could, like, make your mix muddy. It could start to lose and diffuse the character of the sounds. You could start to having weird resonances that are coming through the sends. So you just need to be careful. I would say go for it, but do be a little bit careful. So do you edit the reverb for the individual tracks? Did I edit the reverb for the individual tracks just now? Or what did I do? Okay, sorry. So all I did was I created one reverb on the send, which is called drum space. Then I created that sound, and then I sent a bunch of the drums to that one space for them all to kind of live in this drum vibe, basically. So let's have a little listen to the before and after. If I just do the drums, so solo. Okay, now I just realized there is already a verb track on this remix. So let's say I need to recreate this. I'm just going to ignore that that's there. We'll just delete it. So here's the dry drums. Okay. And this is with my drum space in. Now let's compare. What did the producer do? Pretty good, actually, fairly close. Again, you know, like, would I, if I got this, if the producer gave me that verb already, would I change it? I might try and make it better. And if I felt like I couldn't, then I would use this, you know? So I've always got that there, because my job as a mix engineer is, can I improve upon anything that's here? If I can't, leave it alone. Leave it alone, let it be. It's already awesome, move on. Okay, so should I keep talking, or should we just wrap up with questions? I mean, I can go on about this stuff for, you know, forever. So I don't know where everyone's at. Let me know. I guess we've got until 8, so I could just open the floor to general questions, or I can keep on kind of going through. Let's go on. Okay, a bit of both. Yeah. Okay, so fire the questions in. I'll have the chat there, and just, you know, let's put in the specific questions, and I'll answer them as we go. Okay, so in the meantime, as you're getting the questions up, I'm gonna go back to it. Okay, so I've got all my tracks individually optimized. I've started to add some nice space. I always, with groove-based stuff, I start with my space with my drums to think about making sure that the drums are, because what does space do? It diffuses the sound. So I lose the direct up front, and that's a payoff, right? Because I don't want to lose, let's say, let me just do a bad job here, and I'm gonna go back to my drum space and make it too wide, too high with not enough cutoff, and a bit bigger with no pre-delay. And let's see what's happening with this and why it's kind of probably not going to work. So here's my drum. So that you might, I mean, I don't know if that's obviously something that you don't want, but with this track, it might sound nice with the drum, with the snare by itself, you get this big, nice movement. But then in the context of the mix and the groove, it starts to lose and it starts to be diffused, a bit too diffused. So thinking about the effects that you're doing and how it's affecting the bigger purpose of the song, which, remember, we figured that out when we did Discovery. What's the important aspects? What's the groove? What's the vibe? I've always got to remember that and come back to that. So here with this, bring down the high, make sure it's diffusing when it gets over a certain frequency. That's what this is, the diffusion network. Then I'm thinking about the decay time. At the moment, that was quite a lot. So I'm bringing it down. I want it to be under a second. So I'm going to play with this a little bit more. For me, the decay time, I want it just enough that I hear it, but it kind of ends before the next attack. So that feels good. Now pre-delay is the time it takes for the first reflection to come back. So that's the space that you get with the dry sound before you hear the reverb. So let's try and amp this up a bit. And I'm going to turn this up so you can hear it louder as well. So the bigger the pre-delay, the more it's like you're in an empty hangar or an empty warehouse or something, and the snare drum hits and then it goes to the back wall and it comes back and hits you. It's like a slap, a really big slap back. So what does that do if it's too big? It messes up the groove and it's too noisy. So I'm obviously doing some crazy stuff here, but these are the things that you might want to be careful of in your mix. Am I messing with the groove? Am I enhancing or supporting the groove? Now, why am I using a bit of pre-delay? Because I actually want a bit of space between, I want the dry signals to be dry. I want them to get through to the ears first without the reverb kind of washing over. Because what does that do with dance music? That will diffuse the power of the kick and the snare, and I don't want that. I want that to be really bam, bam, right there. And then I want just a bit afterwards, I want, oof, nice space. I want that feeling of space to come through. So that's playing with the pre-delay. Yeah, okay. Check in there. So controlling the effects volume, like, yes, sometimes I will do that. But with these, I actually control the volume of the send. So I was really careful that I sent the amount that I wanted into the reverb so that it mixed properly for my taste, basically. So let's listen to this again. Okay, so I turned that up until I could hear that bongo, the reaction of the bongo in space. That felt good. I might have decided to go. I might do that a little bit as well, but generally speaking, I'm thinking about how much I'm sending into the effect first, is the first bit. Okay, we're going to do some other things like, what about this sax? The sax might enjoy that space, or it might also like to go somewhere else. Let's check it out. Now, as soon as I put the sax into that space, it was underwhelming. It wasn't interesting. And it's because that sax wants more. It wants more space. It wants more space to move. And it also wants to be differentiated from the space of the drums. So no, we're not going to put that there. We're going to put that into its own, another send, which is a larger one. So you can see here, I use my sends. I've got like a small space, a larger space, and a kind of a delay is kind of what I tend to do. So let's try out this large space with the sax. Now, this might work well as a gate. Let's see. See if I can get my gating groove on this session. Oh, I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think we've got to let it live. Okay, so let's, I'll give up the gating game for today and let's go back to this space. Okay, nothing's on it. I was going, that delay, that reverb isn't it doesn't sound like much. It's because there's nothing there. So that always helps. Okay, now as I want this to be, I'm going to go to high because I want it to be sounding really lush. Now here, I want it to be fully wet, 100% wet on the send. Okay, so we've got the dry signal right here on channel 16. So when I'm on my send, no more dry signal, 100% wet. A lot of people make that mistake. So, okay, cool. Now let's play with this a bit. Bigger, I want bigger. Okay, cool. Now I'm using more of a pre-delay because the sax lines are moving kind of quickly, and I want not to get it too messy. So let's kind of see. Maybe. Now the diffusion is how once it starts bouncing around in the space, how long it keeps on moving around, or how quickly it gets absorbed and goes to nothing, right? So let's see what this actually feels like or sounds like. Okay, so you can see that it bounces and then ends if we have the diffusion right down. And then the diffusion network is what frequencies are allowed to bounce around. So let's say with this, we want to let some of the higher frequencies around to let the kind of the transient crackle of the sax to come through. So I'm going to kind of cut out some of that lower stuff so it's not too muddy. Okay. So let's hear the difference if I take it out, if I diffuse it higher. It sounds like it's a tunnel now. It sounds like it's getting lost into the low frequencies, get to rumble around. It's like more like a tunnel effect, okay? If you want it to be like a sax playing in a tunnel on the street, you would do this. But we don't. We want it to be big and open, so we're gonna... Cool. Now let's hear it in the mix. Cool, I like that. Again, this might be, the producer might be into this or not. That can be a discussion sometimes about the kind of style of spaces that we're going for. Okay, another question. That reverb makes it pop. Yes, nice one. Awesome. Okay, what else we got? Sick. Okay, so we haven't paid any attention to the poor keys. So let's see what we've got. I think we need a delay or two. Let's check it out. What have we got? Okay. Okay, so let's try. I mean, first up, I would probably try sending that to my large space to see whether that feels good. Actually, for this, maybe that sounds nice by itself, but I think because it's rhythmic, it might be better with this kind of a smaller space. So it could sound cool in here. See how it ends kind of quicker, and we still, because then we get that rhythm. We're not losing the rhythm to that kind of lush, big space. And I'm sending more because I want it to be more obvious than the bongo that's going there as well. So let's see if this comes through the mix and if it sounds nice. Not cutting through enough, so I'm decided I'm going to go pre-fader on this, and that means I'm going to have to turn these down because that will send the level before the faders. Also, it's not, I want more, right? And I've got to the loudest that I have, so I'm going to do something which I don't necessarily always recommend, but I need to do it now, so I'm going to gain up the send. So I put the utility on. Okay, too much, obviously, but I've also realized at that point that I want this to be tighter. Cool. Okay, maybe I'm messing with my grand design here a little bit. But anyway, okay, so some of the things we can play with. Now let's think about a delay to finish up with today. I'm going to use the echo because it's lush. Let's see what it can do. So the echo does a lot of really cool things. There's a few things to play with this. So I like to sync out the left and right quite often just because it's fun. So I would do have them unlinked and kind of separate. The other thing that I really do, which is kind of one of my trademarks. I'm sure I'm not alone in doing it, but it's just something that I always do. I like to modulate so it kind of slightly goes out of tune. It just makes it sound more kind of analog-y and a bit more interesting to my ears anyway. So I'm going to modulate the filter slightly. Let me enhance it so you can hear what's going on. Hang on a sec. Can you hear that slightly? Okay, and then also what I might bring in is a little bit of wobble. Hang on a sec, sorry. Can you hear that? Okay, so then just a little bit. Or like, again, if you've got some analogs of the Wurlitzer, kind of a bit of a wobble or a wobble, it kind of sounds nice. So let's see what we got. Now, the last thing I might want to do on this is add a bit of reverb, and I can do it on the actual, on the echo. So let's see. Oh. Now I'm going to go, do I want it to be completely wet? Yes, I do. Also, do I want it to be left and right ping pong? Yes, I think I do. Let's hear how it sounds in the mix. I also realized I want some compression on this. So let's use the other compressor I haven't used today, the glue, because I want to bring out the bap, 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 bring that out and make it a little bit more rhythmic, make it a bit more noticeable. So I'm going to bring the threshold down until I get some gain reduction. Right, now I want the release is key for me here. I want the release to work in a rhythmic way that relates to the movement of the track. So I want the release to be faster than what it is at the moment. Also, I need EQ. It's not cutting through the mix enough. So I need to get into my EQ. So I'm getting excited here now. I'm really getting into this mix. Okay, so what I need to come through here is, I think, the transient. That's what I'm looking for when I'm compressing, and it's helping a bit, but I need more of the top end. So this kind of stuff, right? So the question for me and the question for all of you, we always tend to boost straight away. My question would be, can I cut? And without, because we, again, the more that we add, the more we get a muddy, messy mix. So I'm going to try cut out some of this low stuff before my compression. Okay, let's see how it sounds. Yeah. Cool. Right. Okay. So that was I think a good moment of really seeing what the power of EQ and compression is doing in a mix to help a part of the song integrate and deliver the message that it's intended to do better. And on that note, maybe we should wrap it up. I'm going to go, because I'm just about to start mixing this track for real, or you'll lose me to to the deep. So let's take some final questions. Okay, so let's see with the cool ones. Where are we at? A question about vocals. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, so maybe ask me that again. Okay, so I'll go to Victor's question. I've seen guys bringing down the threshold of the glue compressor really low on loud samples. What are they trying to do? So the more that you bring the threshold, the more that you are, you're going to get more gain reduction. Well, there's a few things to that. I brought the threshold down quite a lot, because the level of the track was not that loud. So I keep on moving the threshold is irrelevant. The gain reduction is the key thing. Okay, so if the sample is quiet, you've got to bring the threshold down low until you get gain reduction. So here, if I just turn down the master for a bit, we can just look at the meters. Okay, so the key thing is this, the gain reduction. So here I've not even got 5 dB, but the threshold is down like a lot. That's because I've got a really slow attack. If I bring this attack up, it's going to be a lot louder because it's catching the sample earlier. It's catching the sound earlier. So the key thing always is to look at the gain reduction. That's what the threshold is for. Now, if they're bringing the threshold down and you've got like this situation going on, you've got some hardcore compression, that's because they're wanting to compress it a lot. And why do they want to compress it a lot? Maybe they want to bring out some of the, like particularly with drums and stuff like that, you can bring out the resonances, you can change the threshold, you can change the kind of character of the sound through time. So the more that you bring down the louder sounds, the more you bring up the quieter sounds, right? So that's the readjusting what you want to hear in that sample, basically. So it's just, it's again, that to me is more of a production technique. When I'm mixing, I'm adjusting and nuancing. I'm not trying to change stuff because the producer will kill me. I'm just enhancing and uplifting, yeah. Okay, so from...
So I think there's 2 questions left
okay.
here. One about, it says, when thinking about vocals and reverb, should that get its own space?
Gotcha. Okay. So vocals and reverb should get its own space. I reckon I would say yes. So for me, when I'm mixing, I will have a space for my drums. I tend to have a larger ambient space. It's for my keyboards and maybe, well, other instrumental stuff. And then my vocals, yes, I give them their own space. Yes. If I'm mixing, again, it depends. If you're doing jazz music or classical music or kind of certain other kinds of genres, then you often mix into the one space. But for most pop music, electronic music, separate vocal space is the go. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
And there's one more here from Melody saying, if I'm mixing within the same DAW I produced in, do I still have to turn all my MIDI tracks into audio before mixing?
Okay, that's a really good question as well. Now, again, this comes back to the first thing that I was saying in the beginning, which is about mindset. Ultimately, everything is up to you, right? My advice is, and this is my workflow, if I have an instrument or a MIDI that I can mess with, I will mess with it. So I bounce my tracks to audio, so it stops me from fiddling with things that I've already decided are done. Literally, that's like the main reason why I do it. And also when I'm mixing, I don't need to be thinking about, should I change the MIDI arrangement? No, I need to be thinking about how is this sound balancing with the other one and all these things that I've been talking to you today. So for me, that's how I flow. That works better for me. I do a better job of mixing and I do a better job of producing if I separate the two. I would encourage you to attempt to like experiment. Do a mix where you bounce all your tracks down, see how it feels. You know, ultimately it's you decide, it's your decision. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Whew. Nice one. I'm all rosy cheeked. I'm getting excited by the track. So I hope it's been good. Mixing, again, it is a process that takes you know, a number of hours, and sometimes it's hard to know like how deep to go and how much to get in there. But I hope that it's given you, you know, some confidence that the processes and the way that you approach it already, and maybe a few fresh ideas as well to try out in your future mixing and production and stuff like that. So cool. Thank you so much.
Jane, that was amazing. There's a lot of love in the chat right now for you.
Yay.
Yeah, really. That was fantastic. I think
awesome. Cool.
I will, as ever, I will put this session up on the G Drive, probably later today or first thing tomorrow, depending on the conversion. But yeah, I think just thanks so much, because that was really, really special and inspiring. And yeah, great stuff. How's everybody feeling?
Exhausted? I'm exhausted.
Inspired.
Are we all set to submit some fantastic mixes on for Friday, Saturday?
Yes.
They have to be mixed as well as Jane's example.
Well, it was already really well mixed to start off. I mean, I can't. can't take too much. But again, a final thing is like feel the vibe and don't overthink it. I think with mixing is you can really get deep into like, but you know, you can practice that stuff separately, and I encourage you to do that. I think that's important. But when you're mixing, don't forget it's feel it and listen. That's the ultimate.
I actually have one last question. You say sometimes you can spend 8, 10, 12 hours on a mix. Like, do you not hate the track at that point? How do you stay?
Well, yeah. I mean, taking breaks every 2 hours is really important. Also for my ears, because I do this a lot, and I'm already kind of having ear problems. So all of you that are DJs probably already you have these same challenges, right? You're hearing goes, and then you just go to bed at night with ringing in your ears. It's not nice. But so taking breaks is super important. And for me, if I didn't like the track enough to enjoy it for 12 hours straight, I wouldn't do it. If it's my track, I think all my tracks are amazing. So I'm all in all the way through. So, but I think that the key thing for me, if I start hating stuff, then I need to pay attention to what that is. And generally it's a problem with transients or frequency collision. It's annoying and I hate it because there's a problem. So that says to me, pay attention. Yeah, but just turn it up and vibe. That's how I enjoy it. Just get into it. Yeah. Cool. Yes, right. Everyone has. All right, y'all.
So we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody. I'll be back on the WhatsApp. We've got a lot of unmuted things. Yeah, we'll be in touch on the WhatsApp in terms of the weekend and sharing whatever other resources we have. But anyway, thanks once again to Jane, and good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Stay safe.
Ciao. Bye.